So in this video, I would like to explain the nominative case in Russian. As a reminder, there are 6 cases in Russian, and throughout these videos, I will cover every case in detail and explain what each case does and what is it for. The 6 cases in Russian are ways of modifying words in 6 different ways, such as question words, which I presented in the previous video. Russian can have a word that can be modified in 6 different ways because the word can be expressed differently in 6 ways. The way a word can be modified is by changing its ending depending on the gender, and in this case, we have the nominative, which is the easiest to understand in Russian. Now, I will not be covering every type of word in these cases, like adjectives and possessive pronouns, because there are so many of them, and they too get modified differently in every case. Instead, we'll only be working with nouns, so I'll give useful and extended phrases with every presented case so that you can visually understand how each case changes a noun. Topics like adjectives and pronouns will be for future videos, but for now, let's focus on the nominative case in Russian. The nominative case is the most common and identifies the subject of a sentence. Every noun, both in English and Russian, is given in the nominative. This case simply answers the question of what, who, and sometimes where. If we take these questions and plug them into a translator, it will give the right translation, being in the nominative. Within the case itself, to understand if a noun is in the nominative, we simply have to ask these questions in any sentence. If we answer the questions что, кто, or где by asking about what, who, or where is the subject, then whatever the subject is, in this case a noun, is in the nominative. Now, what makes the nominative very simple, and you'll see with examples on the way, is that it's the dictionary format for any noun that there is in Russian. So there is no modification in the nominative. Because it is the first case in Russian, the format of any word in the nominative is unchanged, so words do not get modified in this case. Even though I said that Russian modifies words in 6 different ways, what I mean is that there are 6 ways to express a word, with the first having no special changes. In other words, the first way to modify words in Russian requires no modification pattern. So in this case, any noun that you see in the nominative remains unchanged. You can also understand this concept by visually looking at the question words which I gave previously. These words are the dictionary forms of the following questions, so it's no wonder that they don't change. Grammatically, it's very easy to spot a sentence in the nominative because there is only one unmodified noun, or subject, and also because by asking the question what or who, we have a simple answer. So the nominative is the dictionary form for any noun, and it's simply how a noun is expressed the way it should be, with no modification. Whenever there's one and only one subject in a sentence, that noun will be the nominative, and the only possible grammatical change that a noun can have is when it's pluralized. To pluralize a noun in the nominative, you only need to change its ending under the gender of the noun. In English, it's very simple because we add an s at the end of nouns, aside from adding es to nouns that have the following endings. In Russian, there are more ways to pluralize nouns, and I already made a video talking about how to know the gender of a noun. In that video, every example and phrase was in the nominative, and if you want to better understand this concept, you can watch that video before this one. Now, I will refer occasionally to this video because there are things in it that you have to know, but I will not lay out everything in one take. Instead, I'll categorize each concept so that it's simpler to understand. Within the nominative case, you have unmodified nouns, which are the subjects of any sentence. To pluralize a noun in the nominative, we first have to know its grammatical gender. And to know its gender, we simply look at its ending. Here's a short recap. If a noun ends in a consonant, i kratkoye, or mягкий знак, it's masculine. If a noun ends with the vowels a, ya, or mягкий знак, it's feminine. If a noun ends with the vowels ye, yo, or o, it's neuter. If a noun ends with remaining letters that I did not mention, it's also neutered, but to a certain extent, it's a foreign noun, so it will not change in any case under any gender. I will not be showing examples with these nouns because they're not needed as much as the other ones. I'm presenting their pattern like that because the following endings that you see will each have a different ending when plural. There will be exceptions and irregular nouns, but I will only show just a few of them. What's more significant is to focus on the primary rules for following noun endings. In the nominative case, which is the dictionary format of words, here is how each noun ending changes when plural. If a masculine noun ends in a consonant, add y at the end. If it ends in i kratkoye, replace it with E. If it ends with a mягкий знак, replace it with E. If a feminine noun ends with A, replace it with U. However, there is a very vital spelling rule that you have to know with the following ending. Because Russian is expressive, many spellings of Russian words became supported by tradition and created different sounds when the word is pronounced but not when written. The feminine ending with A is one of them, which is known as the 7-letter rule. Typically, if a feminine noun ends with A, you replace it with U to make it plural. However, if the consonant before A is one of these letters and it ends with Ga, Ka, Cha, Ja, Cha, Sha, or Sha, you have to replace A with E instead. It's an exceptional rule that you simply have to apply, because again, it's something that Russian preserved grammatically, and it's done on purpose to make a better sound when the word is said. If a feminine noun ends with Ya, replace it with E to make it plural. If a feminine noun ends with the mягкий знак, also replace it with E to make it plural. If a neuter noun ends with Ye or Yo, replace it with Ya to make it plural. If a neuter noun ends with O, replace it with A. These are the rules for pluralizing nouns in the nominative, and therefore, it's the only possible way to modify nouns, using plurality. Now that I've explained how to identify the gender of Russian nouns and how to pluralize them, let me show a few basic nominative sentences in Russian. Later, there will be a few exceptions and grammar that you don't know yet, but don't focus too much on that. Here we have the phrases a table stands and tables stand. In Russian, the phrases are stol, stoit, and stoli, stoyat. Now, in this case, the verb changes under the plurality of the noun, but don't concentrate on that. Stol is a masculine word ending in a consonant, and when it's plural, we add y at the end. We know it's nominative because by asking what or what stands, we have an answer. Что стоит, stol stoit, or stoli stoyat. That's how we know it's nominative. Plus, stol or stoli is the only subject visible, it's unchanged, singular or plural. That's how nouns function in the nominative, and the same concept can be applied to any noun. Большой музей and большие музеи are big museum and big museums. It's a masculine word that ends with i краткое, and we pluralize it by replacing i краткое with i. Surely, большой changes to большие, but simply focus on the nouns. Muzei and muzei are the only subjects in the nominative because by asking what's big, что большой, we have an answer. Большой музей, or большие музеи. Гость пришел and гости пришли is a guest came and the guests came. It's a masculine noun that ends in the мягкий знак, and we pluralize it by replacing it with e. The verb also changes, but again, don't focus on that. Гость and гости are the only subjects in the nominative because by asking who came, кто пришел, we have an answer. Гость пришел or гости пришли. The same concept can be repeated with a masculine name like Adam пришел, which is Adam came. Кто пришел? Who came? Adam пришел. Adam came. Now we have feminine nouns. Машина стоит and машины стоят. It's a feminine noun that ends in a, and we pluralize it by replacing it with e. Also, remember that the letters sh are always spelled with e. Here we have a feminine noun that has an exceptional ending. Интересная книга and интересные книги. The ending in this noun is ga, so instead of replacing it with u, replace it with e. Here we have a feminine noun that ends in ya, красивая песня, and красивые песни. We pluralize it by replacing ya with e. In the feminine case, the noun doesn't always have to be a what. It can also be a who, like Emma пришла. Emma came, similar to Adam came from the previous sentences. The reason why I'm mentioning this is because masculine and feminine names will have different modified endings in other grammatical cases. It's important to know the difference between names like Adam and Emma because one ends in a consonant, therefore being masculine, but the other is feminine because it ends in a. Wysokoje, zdanie, and wysokie, zdania are tall building and tall buildings. It's a neuter noun that ends in ye, and we pluralize it by replacing it with ya. Różjo and różja are gun and guns. It's a neuter noun that ends in yo, and we pluralize it by replacing it with ya. Lico and lica are face and faces. It's a neuter noun that ends in o, and we pluralize it by replacing it with a. Ordinarily, this is the system for modifying nouns in the nominative case. This is the concept that applies to most nouns in Russian, and it's something that you have to get a feel for. Now, there are many irregular nouns where following this pattern will not work, but I choose to not emphasize these words because trying to remember them will be way too much. I'm just putting the main concept of the nominative in a pattern that anybody can follow. Nonetheless, here are a few examples of exceptions in irregular nouns in the nominative. Doctor has a masculine ending but becomes doktora, even though it looks like we need to put u. Glas becomes glaza and not glazy. Gorod becomes goroda and not gorody. Uchitel turns into uchiteля with ya at the end. Brat is now bratia with mягкий знак and ya at the end, completely irregular from the ending it should have. Stool has the same idea. Stulya. Yabloko changes to yabloki, having an e at the end. And the most irregular one is doch, which is docheri, having a yeri ending. There are additional nouns, however, that are always plural or always singular, like деньги, часы, очки, молоко, вода, and maslo. When put in the nominative, these words will not be able to change form because they're only kept in one form. It's the same thing in English, like money, which cannot be monies, and scissors, which cannot be scissor. Anyhow, it's just a few words to know. In other grammatical cases in Russian, I will not mention any more irregular nouns because there are simply too many of them. What's more important is to understand what the nominative is for and how it works. And again, it's something that you have to get a feel for, as with any other grammatical case.